one of the things I'm really interested in is how women's history itself has impacted religious history in America. So in telling the story of American religion, one of the things that I wanted to do was to tell it from what has been called a multicultural or multi-religious perspective. So you include the perspectives of Black people, Black women, but also people from diverse religions, nationalities, and cultures. So Black women, women of color, have been particularly engaged with this history, but like many of our other histories, they're sometimes written out. So one of the projects that we want to do is to sort of rewrite them into the histories where they've always been. And so one of the things that you see happening with Black women in particular is a turning back to the older ways of practicing religion, which is really a very holistic system, a system that includes not just what we would call worship and celebration, but religions of healing, religions of ancestral reverence, that sort of thing. The idea that we can turn to the traditions, the ways of our ancestors in order to learn something about the present. You might call this a revival of older traditions, practices, spiritual expressions that we find 100 years ago, even in the time of slavery, even before. So for Black women in particular, but Black people in general in the United States, it's almost as if there's a need to find spiritual roots, spiritual origins, and connect to them, irrespective of whatever religion you might practice. I think of this as kind of an ancestral recovery. People turning back to styles and ways of practicing religion that their great-great-grandparents might have practiced, finding out more about the histories of those traditions, and seeing what they have to say to what is going on in the world today. So it's a very exciting thing. It sort of creates a sense that religion and spirituality is something that is alive and well and present. When we talk about African-American religions, generally our mind jumps to Christianity. It jumps to the Black church, which has a long and venerable history in this country. But what I'm seeing is that the future is all about religious diversity. Ironically, this diversity has always been with the Black community. So even in the earliest enslaved communities in the United States, we had Muslims in the slave community, we had Christians, and we also had what we would call magic practitioners of hoodoo, conjure, and these other ancestral African traditions. We've also had, as time went on, African-American Buddhists. We've had African-American freethinkers, atheists. We've had African-American Jews, which is something else I've written about. So what I see and what I think is going to happen in the future is what has happened in the past, a continued diversity of religious expression, a continued embrace of religion and sometimes no religion as an important cultural marker for African-American people, so that African-American politics, which are also diverse, but African-American political expressions are also finding forms in spirituality and spiritual expressions. I was really fascinated to see during the protests a couple of years ago for Black Lives Matter in the wake of the death of George Floyd, a number of religious expressions, altars, songs, people doing ritual work. It's religion may not be associated with one particular tradition, almost as if there's a new merging of politics with, or political expression with religious expression. I see that among young people, whether or not they go to church, whether or not they take part in a religion, that there's sort of like a blending of these spiritual or religious sensibilities with their politics. So it's very exciting. I think it's something that's going to continue, and we'll just see more and more of it.